Hello and welcome to 20 Lore Pro. I'm SirAshtown, and joining with me today is LOAFY off of his top 16 finish at DLC Toronto. LOAFY, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. Feeling good to be back home in Arizona and coming off a qualification for the North American Championships.
Yeah, that's incredibly exciting, and congratulations on that. I mean, that's a really big accomplishment.
Yeah, it's definitely a weight lifted. We were saying before going into the tournament, get qualified and then win. It's two separate goals that are not attached.
Just getting qualified for nationals would be amazing, but also, who doesn't want to win? I mean, we want to go and compete and do well, but also win.
There was definitely a bittersweet moment of walking away with a qualification, but not the deep run that I wanted.
Well, before we get into your amazing experience over at DLC Toronto and your road to getting there, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, LOAFY, and your TCG history?
Yeah, so I've been playing TCGs for the better part of 2 decades. When I was young, it was just kind of opening packs and collecting cards. With Yu-Gi-Oh, it started getting a little more competitive, and then in my teenage years, early 20s, I was playing a lot of Magic the Gathering. Recently, a lot of my old Texas Magic friends have kind of come out of the woodworks and come out of retirement to start playing Lorcana, and so I've been reconnecting with a lot of my older friends, and then I've also been making new friends through the Lorcana community, and felt sort of a reignited sense of competition with Lorcana, and I've really been enjoying the dynamic of playing the game and also collecting the cards.
Have you had any other major finishes in other trading card games that you've played?
I wouldn't say that I had any major finishes, especially being younger. I think I didn't have the maturity to analyze plays, like learn from mistakes, as you would say. And I think now, coming back to Lorcana, I've been able to go through tournament days with a clearer mind, like taking losses and kind of just moving on with stride.
It's funny that you say that, because I remember myself as a kid. I started playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Right off the bat. I played Pokemon right off the bat, and my understanding of the game was not very much. And that's not to say if you're young you can't understand the game. It's just that's where I was. And it wasn't until I was a lot older, I'd say even like past college, like with Magic the Gathering, that I finally, like, one day a light bulb just clicked and I was like, oh, yeah, this is how this game works. I get it now. And you can appreciate it kind of at all stages.
A lot of it's a confidence factor, and when we start talking about the deck choice I made for Toronto, I think having the confidence to identify strong synergies between cards and being able to say, like, yeah, I'm going to sleeve this up, I think this gives me the best chance of winning, is something that was sort of absent from a younger version of myself that was like net decking or just like taking others' words as a gospel.
Yeah, that's something that you see the people around you influencing kind of the meta or the way people play, but instead becoming that trailblazer and saying, you know what, I noticed this and this can work, and I'm going to trust myself and go in this direction. And that's really cool. It's payoff for you here at DLC Toronto. As we're moving on to your tournament experience and how things went at DLC Toronto, we would love to hear kind of about your journey and how that went through, at least for you, on how you got there. So how do you train up in order to get ready for these events?
I'm from Arizona, and the Arizona local scene is just absolutely incredible. There's a good mix of social and competitive, but I would say the competitive scene is very strong here in Arizona. The first events that I went to were all drafts, just because I really like limited, and a big part of my journey has been meeting people in the Arizona local scene and making those connections, being able to lean on them as well as my older friends from other TCGs back in the day has really, it's made me leaps and bounds better than I would be on my own.
Having friends or people that you can trust and rely on and shoot ideas with or work things out, I think it helps build community, and it can be really fun, play test with people and figure out what the best strategies are. Now, you played in DLC Fort Worth and then DLC Toronto. DLC Fort Worth being set 4 without the Bucky errata. DLC Toronto being set 4 still, but with it. What was your experience like at DLC Fort Worth, and what was it like playing in a Bucky format into a Bucky less, or I should say Bucky errata format?
I think my biggest takeaway for both of these questions is simply that Fort Worth for me was a learning experience. I didn't do too well. Part of it was I was just uncomfortable in the situation. You know, I didn't know how the tournament would be structured. I didn't know what the time in between rounds would be like, the lunch break would be like, so on and so forth. So both in terms of actually competing at the tournament as well as the metagame, Fort Worth was just a major learning experience. And based off the Bucky format, going into Toronto, I had a really good idea of what the format would be without Bucky, and that's how I was able to form my deck list and ultimately choose the cards that I did.
Talking about DLC Toronto and your experience there and getting yourself into top 16, could you give us a little bit of an overview of your deck and the deck you used to compete to get into top 16?
Yeah, so without having a ticket, I was actually working on set 5, and I had a list that was pretty similar to this, but with a lot of set 5 cards that I had to then backtrack and pick alternatives for Toronto. But the big synergy that I had in my deck for set 5 was the 3-drop Lyle card. Being able to give opposing characters Reckless and disabling their ability to quest was, I think, the best effect in my deck, and also I think it's probably still the most underrated ability for a card to have. Lyle has a secondary ability in which if one of your characters is banished by any means, you can actually cause your opponent to lose 1 lore. And being able to pair Lyle with cards like Chernenbog's Followers or Magic Brooms mean you had the ability to choose to drain your opponent of lore and cause them to lose lore while gaining card advantage.
Yeah, that's kind of a unique strategy that I hadn't seen too much, I should say, in previous set 4 format. But man, that could really, you're right, drain your opponent pretty quickly when you're running 8 copies of a card that can help trigger Lyle's ability.
The Emerald Amethyst package in general really lends itself to this strategy. Lyle having an enter play trigger pairs well with the Mims. You pair that with the Merlins. And the Ursula package was really there to target all of the song-centric decks that were coming into the format. With the removal of Bucky, decks like Lemon Lime and Amber Steel Song were 2 of my top 3 that I thought would be in the meta, along with Ruby Amethyst. The best line playing blind is definitely Cursed Merfolk on 1, Flynn Rider on 2, and essentially between these 2 cards, you would be able to quickly accumulate lore, and even using Cloud Kicker on turn 3 to just earn the tempo name of the deck. That would allow you to get to, say, like 14 lore before your opponent would be able to stabilize, and then you'd be able to use cards like the Queen's Castle and Merlin Goat to finish getting to 20 lore.
That's something that I really like these Amethyst Emerald lists, is that you're trying to get lore as much as you can, but when you can't, or your opponent plays something troublesome, you have ways to either try to bounce it or just to kind of subvert the ability of it kind of taking over. I noticed that in your specific list, you're playing this 1 copy of Dawn. Can you talk to us a little bit about that decision of playing the 1 of for Dawn? And we also see a 1 of for Lucifer too.
Yeah, so this actually came off the heel of choosing to play Magic Broom over Pegasus, the 1-drop Pegasus, because typically in Emerald Amethyst tempo, they would play 4 Pegasus 1-drop, and they would be aiming to shift in the Pegasus 5-drop. Without having the Pegasus 1-drop, the next cut I made was the Pegasus 5-drop, and Don Carnage was kind of the obvious pick. It's a 4/4 evasive, quest for 2, and this card is very, very troublesome for the Ruby decks. Without the assistance of Ice Block, there's no way for them to actually remove it. It dodges Medusa, it dodges Maui, and if they're in a really bad spot, if they're really far behind, they actually have to cast Be Prepared just to get rid of this single card. And I ended up actually going with a 1/1/1 split on my 5-drop slot just to have versatility between Lucifer as a discard option, and I actually got a lot of people. They had 2 cards left in their hand. Lucifer discarded both of them, and there was pretty much no coming back from that. And Cricky was actually, you could have probably played 2 Don Carnage over Cricky, but Cricky was just such a massive swing sometimes, being able to take out locations with my other characters quickly, or simply just have favorable trades on the board. And then he quests for 3 as well, which sometimes ended up just being I cast him on 5 and the next turn I quested for 3.
Well, it's cool too to also say, okay, my deck has several one-ofs. There's a guessing factor that you create in your opponent where, oh, he played a Dawn. Like, how many Dawns is he playing? How many of these do I have to contend with? You kind of create this guessing factor in your opponent that they now have to deal with while you're playing here with only 1 copy of it. Like you said, it has a game-changing state that those 5-drops can really just swing the game in your favor. How was playing John Silver in this list, and did you see him come out and make a big splash for your game strategy?
John Silver was the second best card in the deck besides Lyle. The ability to give your opponent's characters Reckless, it disables their ability to quest. It sometimes creates unfavorable trades for them. Sometimes they have to challenge in and just banish their own characters. John Silver also has the added bonus of his stat line, meaning he was very safe to play against Ruby decks. They had no way to remove him without Maui or Be Prepared. There were definitely situations where once you start questing with John Silver, your opponent is just locked out of the game.
Same thing can also be said about the 7-drop Ursula.
Yeah, in my opinion, if you're playing Emerald Amethyst, you have to be playing the Ursula package. There's so many song-centric decks, and while the 2-drop Ursula can do a great job of stripping them of tools early on in the game, the 7-drop Ursula, or the big Ursula as people call it, just absolutely turns off the sing mechanic for your opponent, and the ability to exert their characters after questing means you can essentially pick off their board turn by turn until the game is just over. And Ursula is another great example of, if you look at this list, you've got Ursula, you've got John Silver, you got Don Carnage. There's no way for many decks to remove these cards, but Ursula being a 4/7 stat line is just so difficult for many decks to remove.
Well, thank you so much for giving us a look into your Amethyst Emerald deck list and the list that got you into top 16. Could you talk to us kind of about your experience at DLC Toronto and kind of how it went overall for you?
Especially with this just being the first year of competition for PPG and the Lorcana challenges. They're being ran extremely well. The judging staff is excellent. Like, if I could choose right now to have these sets of judges that I've experienced in Fort Worth and Toronto just judge every single event, I would lock them in and take them with me everywhere. The 2-game format really lends itself to kind of a smooth day one. Playing through a 1,000, 2,000 person field might seem very daunting, but the rounds are over in more or less an hour, and the 9 rounds, it is still a lot. You're probably locked in for about 10 hours of Lorcana on day one, but it doesn't feel as grueling as a 2 out of 3 format.
On day 2, you do get to play best of 3. And what was it like for you to switch into going into best of 3 on your day 2?
It felt really good. I think one thing that I really liked about my deck was I felt like I could beat every deck. Different cards in my deck lent themselves to being on the play and lent themselves being on the draw. And so my mulligan decisions were very clear and concise for me throughout the whole tournament. And for day two, I felt really comfortable with the best of three.
That's so awesome to hear. And on your day one, what was kind of your favorite deck to play against?
So I actually, within the first 3 rounds, played 2 Emerald Amethyst mirrors, and those mirror matches, along with I played against 2 Amber Ruby Mufasas. My tech choices of including Lyle and John Silver essentially made those mirror matches and that matchup in particular just super one-sided in my favor. And against my round one opponent, I actually caused him to, in a single game, lose 12 lore off Lyle. He actually, if he would have quested with all his characters before ending his turn, he could have gotten to 17 lore. So he gained 29 lore that game, but he had lost 12
Oh my
along
gosh.
the way. Yeah, Lyle was by far the best card in my deck.
Wow. It's really incredible that you found kind of this tech card to get in there and then become the best card in your list. How was it making day two, knowing that you got top 64, and then even further playing your way and getting into top 16?
Day one was pretty up and down. I had some very one-sided matchups in my favor, and then I had some splits and even a loss that were with matchups that I felt favored against. So I think my day one performance could have been better, but kind of the silver lining of this 2 game format is that day one, your mindset and your focus should all be on the longevity of the tournament. You're just trying to get top 64. You're just trying to lock up that day two position for yourself. And day two is where you really get to prove if your deck has what it takes to take the event. For people who haven't gotten to top 64 or aren't sure how the top 64 works, it feels much more competitive in day two. If you have the higher seed on day one, you get to pick whether or not you play first. You're not die rolling. So you really are, whatever you earned on day one is what you are playing with on day two.
That's great to hear, because it feels like you kind of earned the ability to play first instead of it being left up to chance and kind of erasing all the hard work that you did on day one to get into the high seed. Well, on day one, when you finished and you got in the top 64, what was your placement?
I was 37th, and the way everything played out for day two, I was on the draw for my top 64 match, but then I was on the play for the rest.
Congratulations on your top 16. What's next for you as you're looking to going towards nationals and kind of your prep for that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a tremendous weight to be off my shoulders, knowing that I'm already qualified. I don't have a ticket for Vegas yet, although I'm booked and going because I have friends going. So I'm hoping to see. I mean, hopefully I get off the wait list and I'm able to play in Vegas. But I'm looking into some other alternatives. Maybe worst case, I'll just play side events. As far as the North American Championships go, it's going to be a totally different format, and there's only 2 events left in the North American circuit. But I would like to get a Mickey to bring home before the end of the season.
Yeah, that's a great goal to have. Well, before we head off today, any advice you'd give to players who are looking to compete at that highest level of Lorcana?
You just get out there and play. As I said, for myself, going to Fort Worth was all about getting comfortable with the environment. So go out and compete at your local scenes, meet some players, build off of each other, and eventually you'll be able to come to these challenges and you'll be comfortable with the environment, you'll be confident in your deck choices, and you'll be confident in your plays.
We appreciate the advice, Lofi, and for all of you at home who are looking into getting into competitive Lorcana, coming to these DLCs and competing, we want to wish you luck as well. We're going to try to have as many deck techs and tournaments for you to watch that we get to stream. Well, hey, Lofi, thank you so much for interviewing with us today. Again, huge congratulations to your top 16 finish. We're wishing the best for you in the future, and we hope to see you in videos in the future.